Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Bush, and I am the Membership Director at the North Suburban Y. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is my pleasure to welcome Matt Margolis with Elder Law, right?
Margolis, Weldon.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
And today he is speaking about understanding Medicaid and how to protect assets legally. Matt is an elder law attorney and we'll discuss the ins and outs of Medicaid for nursing homes and supportive living facilities and why it's never too late to protect your assets. And Mark, you can take it from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.
Well, we only have one person attending, so I guess, Mr. or Mrs. Cameron, frankly, I would be open if you have any questions that you would like to hear today after I introduce myself. If you want to type them in the chat box, Mrs. Cameron, then I'd be happy to cover them because frankly, I've given this talk plenty of times before. So the YMCA has this recorded and people, as far as I'm concerned, people can go on the website and look at all those talks and get very similar information. So I don't think there's any sense in, I'll cover whatever you think would be interesting, frankly, but just a little bit about myself. My partner Lauren and I have an estate planning and elder law practice in downtown Park Ridge. I'm a Northbrook resident. I live not too far from the YMCA. And we assist people with wills and trusts and powers of attorney, all sorts of estate planning for young and young families, middle-aged families, older families, single individuals. Doesn't really matter. We help everybody. And then on the elder law side, we do a lot as it relates to helping folks that are, starting to transition and need care, whether it's care in the home, care in some sort of assisted living facility or skilled nursing home, supportive living. And then we can help navigate benefits such as Medicaid. There's a particular benefit through the VA that we can help folks with, but Medicaid is really the benefit that we help people with quite a bit. And my partner, Lauren, is the one that does the majority of that in our practice. So tell me what interested you about the talk today, and let me make sure I things that would be helpful for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to go and looked at online somewhere else. It was just I'm thinking about joining the Y. I just retired from teaching in June.
Oh,
so I'm
congratulations.
trying to get my my ducks in a row. And I'm on Medicaid. I have an Aetna supplement, and I don't know whether I'm adequately prepared or not, I suppose is what I'm saying. But I'm very happy just to watch. If you've already done this talk, if you can just let me know where to find it, I'm happy to do that.
I'm happy to discuss it today. I've got the time. And I'm guessing you're on Medicare, not Medicaid.
Yes, Medicare.
I'm just presuming if you just got done teaching. Okay. So yeah, and I wouldn't know where to look on the WISE website. And so let's just kind of talk about the conversation today. And you're here and I'm here, so that's fine. Okay. So, and what you just said is actually really something that a lot of people do. People mix up Medicare and Medicaid all the time.
Well, also, I only moved here in my 30s from Scotland. So
I was going to say, I knew that accent sounded like you weren't, okay. So, but I'm glad you did that because it's really important that people understand that because there's a huge difference between Medicare and Medicaid and what they cover. Okay, so Medicare is that's health insurance, right? So Medicare is health insurance for people over the age of 65. You can get Medicare at a younger age than 65, but typically that's for individuals that are determined to be disabled by Social Security, and they can get on Medicare at a younger age. That's a smaller percentage of the population. The majority of people that are Medicare recipients are over the age of 65. Medicare acts as insurance. Okay. Medicare does not cover long-term care. And again, I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of people, and this is not why you brought it up, but a lot of people and a lot of clients that we meet with have this idea that if they end up in a nursing home at some point, God forbid, or if they end up in a supportive living facility or assisted living, they think that Medicare might cover their long-term care, right? Because, hey, I've been paying into Medicare for all these years. And so obviously, not obviously, but I think, people think Medicare is going to all of a sudden cover their long-term care. I want to get out in front of it. I've got to, just in case anybody can see this, watching this at some point, in case you notice this, I'm working with a chipped tooth. In case it becomes evident, a broken hand, I fell off my bike. So just in case I talk with a little bit of a lisp, or in case you notice when I smile here and there that I've got a cracked tooth. I normally don't operate that way. I don't walk around with a chipped tooth. So just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. But so yeah, Medicare is health insurance. Medicare is not long-term care insurance. Medicare does not cover long-term care in any kind of nursing home or supportive living facility. The only type of short period long-term care that Medicare does cover is a situation where we are getting rehab in a nursing home. Okay, but it's only if we meet certain qualifications. So if I have if I'm hospitalized and I have 3 overnights and I'm in a hospital and I am inpatient status. Okay, I can't be under observation. And this is really important because I've had clients come to us. We've had clients come to us down the road or after the fact where they were under observation. They were in the hospital for 4 or 5 nights, but they were under observation for 3 of those nights, and they were only inpatient status for 1 or 2 of them. So if you are in the hospital for 3 overnights, inpatient status, and then discharged to do rehab, which is typically done in a nursing home. Okay, a lot of rehab is done in a nursing home. Medicare will cover the first 20 days, 100%. Okay, and then for up to another 80 days, and you are not guaranteed another 80 days. Okay, you're not even guaranteed the first 20 days, but for up to another 80 days, Medicare will cover 80% of the rehab. And then if you've got a more traditional Medicare supplement, the supplement will cover the other 20%. If you've got a Medicare Advantage plan, some of those work a little bit differently. Sometimes they'll pay for the first 20 days, and then the next 20 days you're out of pocket, and then the next 40 days they will cover. So you really need to understand how those plans work. So we really advise our clients, even though that's not something that we do, we don't sell those policies, we're not insurance salesmen, but people really need to understand the types of plans they have, whether it's a Medicare Advantage plan, whether it's a Medicare supplement. You really have to understand how those plans work, and I would really advise people to understand how they work in a rehab scenario, because rehab can be a lot of money. If I'm discharged from a hospital and I go to rehab at a nursing home, that daily cost of rehab can be $400 to $700 a day. And so when I talk about Medicare covering this, basically Medicare the benefit there is that Medicare will cover for up to about 100 days, right? The first 20 days, 100%. The 80 days after that, they'll cover 80%. And ideally, if you've got a good Medicare supplement, it'll cover the 20%. So you could potentially be not out of pocket at all for up to 100 days. But again, make sure you understand how your plan works. Also understand, and I tell clients this all the time, that Medicare will stop paying. You are not guaranteed 100 days. Some clients come to us, the family members will come to us, and it's like day 37 in the nursing home. And the clients come to us saying, what's going on here? The nursing home is telling us that they're going to stop paying in 5 days, right? They give them a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a heads up, right? And the nursing home will say, your dad or your mom or your husband or your wife, they've plateaued. They're not making any progress, either because they don't want to, right? They've given up, or they can't, right? Their injury is such that they just can't. And so they can stay here, but Medicare is not going to pay for that. Medicare will pay for rehab. Medicare will pay for somebody who is willing to, or who can continue to get better. Medicare will not pay for long-term care. Medicare will not pay for somebody to just sit and live out their life in a nursing home. Okay. So again, don't mean to go off on a tangent, but just I think it's a really good nugget of information for people to understand. And if nothing else, it's really important for for people to be either an advocate for themselves when they're in the hospital, or an advocate for their loved one when they're in the hospital, and to really have an understanding. Is my person in the hospital, are they under observation? Are they inpatient status? Because if you're not asking, you're typically not finding out until you're discharged. You might, just because you're sleeping overnight in a hospital does not mean you're inpatient status. And people think that. The average person thinks, I'm sleeping in the hospital, of course I'm inpatient. I'm not under observation. Observation would seem to be like, I go in, they see me for a couple hours and I leave. You could be there for 3 nights and be under observation all 3 nights. So really important. So don't mean to go off on the tangent, but really, I'm glad you brought that up. Really, the whole point of this talk is really to discuss the idea of protecting assets. Yeah. Because, when we really, a lot of people don't really understand, unless they've had a loved one start paying for long-term care. A lot of people don't really understand how expensive the costs of long-term care are these days. When I started, I don't like that I start sentences that like that nowadays. When I started doing this 13 years ago, the average cost of a caregiver through a company, okay, not like a person that we're finding off the street, so to speak, that took care of my aunt or my grandma. That was really nice. But the average company, caregiving company, was charging, I want to say, about $20 to $23 an hour about 13 years ago. Now you're looking at costs being probably somewhere between, I want to say, $29 and $35 an hour for a caregiver in the home. I want to say that the average cost of a nursing home, sort of on in this general area, and I'm saying sort of the greater North Shore, 10 years ago was probably $7,500 to $9,000 a month. Now I'd say it's probably $9,000 to $12,000 a month. Okay. So, but we know that, right? We know that costs of healthcare are increasing, right? We know these things. But when you start to think about the idea that a nursing home can cost $12,000 a month times 12 months, it's $144,000 a year. It's a lot of money, right? So when we think about, like, when I meet with clients and, they did a good job saving. They might have that IRA and that, they've got their house that's worth $350,000 and it's paid off. They've got that IRA that they were putting money into that's, $600,000. And they've got, maybe they're lucky enough that one of the spouses has a nice pension. Maybe they've got, $4,500 or $5,000 coming in. But you go and, one of them all of a sudden ends up in a nursing home and you're paying $150,000 a year or $100,000 a year. It's a big shock to the system, right? To the financial system, and to the mental system, right? I mean, when you're talking about, retired folks, and I'm going to say typically folks that are a little bit older, most folks, by the time somebody ends up in a nursing home, now we meet people that are living wild lives and doing a lot of crazy travel and all of that, but most people, they're living modestly at this point in their lives. They're living within their means. They're typically spending within their Social Security or their pensions, whatever their income is each month. They're not really dipping into they're having to pull money out of their IRAs, but it's going right back into their savings account. So they're not dipping into their savings at all. They're spending what's coming in from Social Security or their pensions. And now all of a sudden you throw this $10,000 or $12,000 bill in the mix, even if they can afford it, and they know they can afford it for a little bit. It's a shock. And a lot of people just aren't prepared for it. Even if we know in the back of our heads that these things can happen, when they do, people aren't prepared. Here's the thing. There's long-term care insurance out there. I think it's a great idea. we tell people that, you know, we don't sell it, but I tell people that bring it up all the time. Hey, if you can get it, you know, if it's something you can afford and you can qualify for, go look at it. You know, if you've had a loved one need long-term care for an extended period of time, you know how expensive it can be. And long-term care insurance affords you more options. Because that might be able to, you know, some people want to stay in their home. You know, Medicaid, which we'll talk about in a minute, Medicaid's not going to allow me to stay in my home. If I'm applying for Medicaid, I'm moving into a nursing home or a supportive living facility. I'm moving into a certain type of place that allows me to apply for Medicaid. There are very limited benefits that I can get at home through Medicaid. But if I need any kind of consistent care, that's not going to be at home through Medicaid. It just won't be. So if we can get long-term care insurance, you know, it's at least worth it to have the conversation with somebody, to sit down and see, is this something I can qualify for? You know, is it something that, you know, I'd rather have people look into it and say, you know what, that's too expensive. It's too expensive for me at this point. It doesn't make sense. But get educated on it. You know, I'd say it's better to get educated and determine, okay, not for me, than to not get it and at some point be like, man, maybe I should have looked into it. Because I would argue that most people, when given the option, would prefer to age in their own home. To some extent. You know, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of folks, if they move out of their home at an early enough age, you know, there's a lot of people that want to move into some of these long-term care communities, right? They like the idea of community. Whether it's a couple, a lot of times, maybe if it's a widow or a single individual, you know, moving into if you know where the YMCA is in Northbrook, you know, look right next door to the YMCA, Covenant Living in Northbrook, right? You look at a place like Covenant Living or places similar to Covenant Living, you know, there's a sense of community there, right? So we've got other people, there are activities, there's built-in friends, there's stuff to do. Because while I think people have this idea that they want to age in their own home, but that can also be very lonely for people. And so there's like there's this middle ground between aging in our own home, which can be very isolating, and being in a nursing home, which, you know, if we were in a room right now and there was more than just, how do I pronounce your first name?
Sheena.
Okay. If it was more than just Sheena and I, and there was, you know, a room full of people, and I said, who would love to go into a nursing home if they had a choice, I can almost guarantee that nobody would raise their hand. Right. But if I said, who would rather live there, you know, live in their house until the end by themselves, or live in a place like Covenant Living or some Covenant Living like place, I bet it would be pretty split. And so again, you know, at the end of the day, when we look at long-term care, the unfortunate reality is it comes down to financials.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And so we have to understand, you know, what these places are going to cost. The idea that that over time the costs are only going to increase, and what are we going to do? What can we do ahead of time proactively to set ourselves up to give ourselves more options? That's all. There might not be a perfect, you know, things may not be perfect. Okay. But how can we at least set ourselves up for a situation that allows us a few more options than less, I guess. So, and I want to be clear, when we look at Medicaid, you know, Medicaid is a benefit, as I mentioned earlier, that is only going to be something we can apply for in two types of facilities. The most common type of facility that people are familiar with that takes Medicaid is a nursing home. Okay, and a nursing home is sort of that you know, top tier level of care, long-term care facility, right? You know, my dad, who will be 91 on Saturday, still will refer to a nursing home as like a convalescent home. Okay, right? And then you've got supportive living facilities out there, and a supportive living facility. And let me go back to a nursing home really quick. Not all nursing homes take Medicaid. Okay, some do and some don't. You know, there's Whitehall in Deerfield. Great place. They've got a great reputation. I've got a lot of clients that do a lot of rehab there. Their rehab is clearly very popular with a lot of the hospitals, because a lot of the hospitals discharge folks there for rehab. But Whitehall and Deerfield does not take Medicaid. Okay. Now you've got plenty of places that do take Medicaid, right? You've got Glenview Terrace, which is on Greenwood in Glenview. Okay. And when we've got places that take, and there's plenty more, I'm just giving you two examples, but, and I want to be clear, when I say that there's a place like Glenview Terrace that takes Medicaid, it's not like everybody in there is on Medicaid, right? There are certain people in there that are on Medicaid, and they might be on, the second floor. And then there's certain people in there that are not on Medicaid, and they might be on the first floor. And I'm just making that up, but the majority of nursing homes that take Medicaid, they're split. There's a lot of private pay, and then there's some Medicaid residents. And actually, they tend to be more private pay versus Medicaid residents, right? They have a certain amount of Medicaid beds that are reserved for folks that are qualifying for Medicaid. Now, there are some places that are predominantly Medicaid. Okay, those do exist. Those tend to not be the places that you want to move into when it comes to a Medicaid facility. Because the more Medicaid beds they have, right? If they've got 80% Medicaid beds, that means there's a lot more state funding there, a lot less private dollars going to the facility. Yeah. So to go back to supportive living, a supportive living facility, the type of care in a supportive living is more like assisted living. Okay, so it's not quite the level of care as skilled nursing, as a nursing home. Okay, it's not, but if you're in supportive living, you need help with some activities of daily living, just not as much help as you would need if you were in a skilled nursing facility. Okay. Every single supportive living facility in Illinois takes Medicaid, is the difference. If the facility falls under the category of supportive living, it takes Medicaid. Okay, so you don't need to question whether it takes Medicaid or not. Or as a nursing home, you need to find out. I'm going to really focus when we start talking about Medicaid, because the rules are slightly different. I'm going to focus more on nursing homes. They're more popular. We deal with them a little bit more. Just for the sake of time, I want to kind of discuss that. So when we look at Medicaid. And the rules have actually changed slightly in the last year, actually, with Medicaid. A little bit more, definitely more favorable for Medicaid applicants as far as how much money they can keep. I would say a little bit less favorable from the standpoint of how strict the state of Illinois is becoming from an application standpoint. Okay, so when we deal with the state of Illinois, when we're applying for Medicaid, they're getting to be a little bit more difficult, a little more strict. So let's kind of talk about how Medicaid works, just so Sheena, you have an understanding, and anybody else that might watch this at some point has an understanding. And so this is actually a very good reason to record this one and to go into a little more detail, because the numbers have changed since the last talk I gave. So if I'm a single person applying for Medicaid in a nursing home, I can have $17,500 in my name. That went up this year. It used to be $2,000. And it was $2,000 for a long time. It was, I've been doing this for 13 years. It was $2,000 when I started doing this 13 years ago. And I want to say it was $2,000 for a while prior to that. So the fact that it went up this year to $17,500 is pretty significant. Okay, so if I'm a single person applying for Medicaid in a nursing home, I can have up to $17,500 in my name. One thing that has not changed is that when it comes to my income, okay, if I've got $2,500 a month coming in from Social Security, I get to keep a whopping, get ready for it, $30 a month of my income. Okay, so if I go into nursing home XYZ, well, I can keep up to $17,500 of assets, and I can have 1, 2, 3 different accounts, but they can't total more than $17,500. I can't own real estate, just to be clear. It's not like I can have that plus keep my house. If I'm a single person, I cannot keep my house. But if my income is 2,500 or 3,000 or 4,000, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I have to give my income to the nursing home. Okay, so I pay the nursing home my income every month, but I get to keep $30, right? Enough to, I don't know, pay for a haircut. If I'm a guy, maybe enough for a men's haircut, not a woman's haircut, that's for sure. It's kind of barely enough for my haircut these days. And if I've got a Medicare supplement, to be clear, if I've got a Medicare supplement, we tell our clients, keep your Medicare supplement, okay? And so I can still pay for my Medicare supplement. So if I've got $2,500 coming in from Social Security, I'm going to pay for my Medicare supplement. I'm going to give money to the nursing home, and then I'm going to keep $30. Okay. Or I should say, pay the Medicare supplement, keep $30, give the remainder to the nursing home. Is probably the better way to look at it. And the reason why you keep the Medicare supplement is you could be injured. What if you slipped in the nursing home? What if something happened and you went to the hospital? You want the Medicare supplement because if you end up back in rehab, the Medicare supplement can help pay for rehab. Now, even though Medicaid can cover that, you might end up in a better rehab facility. If nothing else, the Medicare supplement might allow you to continue seeing certain medical providers that you would not otherwise be able to see if you only had Medicaid as your secondary insurance to Medicare. And I'm hoping this is clear, keeping that Medicare supplement isn't costing you anything, because you're either giving that $250 of Blue Cross Blue Shield, let's say, or you're giving it to the nursing home. You're not able to keep it, doesn't matter. The last thing is that there's a look back period. Medicaid has a 5-year look back. So when I go to apply for Medicaid in the nursing home, Medicaid is going to want to see, what did I do with my money over the last 5 years? Okay, what did I do with my money over the last 5 years? And what Medicaid's looking for is plain and simple. Did I gift anything? Now they use the term, did I make any transfers for less than fair market value? I'll explain what that means, because it's a little bit different than gifting, and it's important to understand. But did I gift any assets? And this is really important, because of course people do this, right? Because everybody's smarter than the system. Everybody thinks they're going to outsmart Medicaid, right? We have clients that come to us all the time, right? The adult kids come to us with their mom or dad, and they're like, all right, we just transferred mom and dad's house to the 3 of us, and we're going to apply for Medicaid for mom, like in 3 months when she goes into the nursing home. Like, we did it. We got the house out of her name. And I'm like, not so fast, right? Medicaid's going to ask to see what mom did with all of her assets over the last 5 years. The house was an asset. You're going to have to show what you did with the house. They're going to see that the house was gifted to the 3 kids. It's going to be an issue. Can't just gift assets, okay, within 5 years. Now, there are ways to do it. We'll talk about that, okay? So one of the purposes of today's conversation. But you can't just do it willy-nilly. I mean, you can, but there's consequences, right? So if I gift assets, let's make it easy. Let's say I gift $50,000 over the last 5 years to my kids. And let me be clear, a gift can be a very clear gift, right? I write my son a check for $50,000. But then we have things that we don't really look at as gifts, but Medicaid would consider them to be gifts, right? We paid for guitar lessons for our grandson. We paid the divorce attorney for our son who was going through a divorce. In some cases, and this sounds terrible, we made very nice gifts to a church or a synagogue. So those sorts of things can come back, and Medicaid could take issue with them. Similarly, I sold my car to my grandson for $5,000, but it was worth $20,000. Medicaid would say I made a $15,000 gift because it was worth $20,000, but I sold it for $5,000. So I gifted $15,000. That's where the less than fair market value that I mentioned earlier, right? A transfer for less than fair market value. Same with people are like, well, can't my dad just sell me his house for $1,000? I'm like, sure. What's his house worth? $200,000. Okay. Then dad is making a $199,000 gift. So the way that Medicaid treats a gift within the 5-year period before applying for Medicaid, 60 months. And it doesn't matter if it was 49 months ago or 2 months ago prior to applying for Medicaid. Okay. They don't prorate the gift. The way that Medicaid looks at that is they take the amount of the gift, let's say it was $50,000, and they divide it by the monthly cost of care at the nursing home. So let's say I'm down to $17,500 or less. Okay, I'm at the limit where I could apply for Medicaid at nursing home XYZ, and the cost of the monthly cost of the nursing home, to make it really easy, is $10,000 a month. But I gave away $50,000 over the last 5 years. Medicaid is going to say, Matt, you're approved for Medicaid, but you gave away $50,000. We're going to give you a 5-month penalty. They're going to take the amount of the gift and they're going to divide it by the monthly cost of care. And if you think about it, what they're doing is they're basically saying, how many months did you give away, right? If you didn't make that gift, you would have been able to pay for the next 5 months of care. Then you would have applied for Medicaid, right? That's their logic. At least that's what we think their logic is, right? So had you not made that gift and you moved into our nursing home today, you would have been able to pay for the next 5 months. So you're approved for Medicaid, Matt. However, you're going to have to figure out a way to pay for the next 5 months out of pocket because the state's not paying for you. So figure it out. So at that point, it becomes an issue, unless I can get the money back from my son or whoever I gave the money to. I guess I didn't make that. I didn't say who I gave it to in this example. Unless I can get the money back from whoever I gifted it to in this example, I'm kind of in between a rock and a hard place. And my issue at this point isn't really with Medicaid. It's with the nursing home. So if I can't get the money back, but I'm in a situation where I need nursing care and I can't go back home, I'm pretty much pleading to the nursing home saying, you know, I'll give you all my income every month. I'll turn over the $17,500 to you, but I need to be here for the next 5 months. And then Medicaid will kick in after that. You know, Medicaid will start paying you after that. So those are tough situations to be in. Those are situations we don't want to be in. So, you know, we really try to tell clients, I mean, and of course we can only tell clients when we meet with them not to do these things. Or hopefully if they've done them, you know, ideally we can undo them, because being in these situations is not ideal. You know, the state is pretty unwilling to undo these penalties. Let's talk about how Medicaid works with a married couple. Okay, so if I'm applying for Medicaid and going into a nursing home, everything I just talked about remains true. I can have $17,500 in my name. I get to keep a whopping $30 a month of my income, and the 5-year look back applies. My wife, who's at home, okay, she can have up to $120,000, $120,780 to be exact. Let's call it $120,000 to be for short. $120,000, a house and a car in her name. Okay, that's what Medicaid allows her to have. Clients always ask me, is there a limit on what the value of the house can be? There's not, but you know, I always say, you know, people typically don't come to us with $3 million houses applying for Medicaid. It's typically not how it works. But we've had clients come to us where they've got, you know, $300,000 and a house that has a mortgage, and one of the spouses has to go into the nursing home. And so a lot of times we'll say, you know, listen, you've got too much money to apply for Medicaid right now, but you still have a mortgage on the house. We can pay off the mortgage. The house is a protected asset. The spouse gets to keep the house. So we've had clients do that. We've had situations in the past think we've only done this once. I had a client where they were renting an apartment. They had like $650,000. They bought the spouse, her husband was going to the nursing home. She bought a house to live in. She was allowed to have a house plus cash. It was an easy way to protect the money and get on Medicaid. So the spouse can have $120,000 a house and a car. The spouse has a limit of income also. So the spouse, this number just went up as well. It went up. I'm almost forgetting what it used to be because it's been so long now. But the spouse is allowed to have $3,715 a month of income. $3,715. This went up about $1,000. I want to say it was about $2,739 before, roughly. So this went up about $1,000 a month, which is a big difference. You know, so the spouse is able to have an additional close to $12,000 a year in income. So what does this mean? Let me give you an example. Let's say that my wife and I, between the two of us, let's say that my income, let me give you this example. Let's say my income is $2,500 a month, and my wife from Social Security, and my wife's Social Security is $1,100, and I'm the one going in the nursing home. I only get to keep $30 a month. If I was single, the rest of my income would go to the nursing home, right? Because my wife can have up to $3,715 a month, I can transfer my excess income to her to get her up to that number. Okay, so if her income is $1,100 a month and mine's $2,500, I get to keep my $30 a month, and then I can transfer my additional income to her, which would still keep her under the $3,715. I can't push her over. Okay, I can't push her income over the $3,715, but I can transfer my income to her to get her up to it if her income is less. Now, if her income is already above $3,715, right? Maybe she's got a nice pension, maybe she's still working, then I cannot transfer my income to her, and my income, my excess income, would go to the nursing home. And if her income is more than $3,715, there are calculations through Medicaid where she would have to give a very, 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 very small percentage of the income that's over the $3,715 to the nursing home every month. I want to say it's like $5 for every $100 that's over the $3,715. Don't quote me on that. It's so rare that this comes up. I don't know why it's rare, because we do run into people with nice pensions. But there is a support that the state can ask for. And then the 5-year look back applies to both spouses. So even if I'm the one applying for Medicaid and my wife and I have some separate accounts, any gifting that she does impacts me. It's not like she can start gifting assets and it's not, and it's somehow going to not impact my Medicaid application. Okay, it will. Medicaid looks at the two of us together. There's a few exceptions to gifting. Okay, I'll talk about 3 that we see here and there. I mean, it's pretty few and far between, to be honest, but they come up. So we talk about the house being a protected asset when there's a spouse, but if I'm a single individual applying for Medicaid, it's not protected. I would have to sell my house and spend the money down prior to applying for Medicaid. However, if I have an adult child that's been living in my house and taking care of me for at least 2 years prior to applying for Medicaid, and there's some paperwork that we'd have to get from the doctor, the doctor would have to show that I actually needed some care. It's not like my kid was just living with me. Okay, it has to be more than my child just living with me. There'd have to be some kind of letter from a doctor saying that I actually needed some care, and even a letter from the doctor saying that, from the doctor's perspective, that my child was providing the care is even more helpful. But with some paperwork, and we won't go into all the details, but if I had an adult child, not grandchild, I want to be clear, not grandchild. People always ask this. Adult child living with me and taking care of me for at least 2 years prior to the time that I move out and go into a nursing home and then apply for Medicaid, I can transfer my house to that adult child, and it's not a gift. Okay, we call it the child caregiver exemption. Another exception to gifting is if I have a child who is receiving SSDI, Social Security Disability. Okay, SSDI, not SSI, big difference. Okay, SSDI, Social Security Disability. If I have a child receiving Social Security Disability, I can gift an unlimited amount of assets to them and apply for Medicaid and not be penalized. The last one is that if I have a disabled child, I can transfer money to a special needs trust for that disabled child, and that would not count as a gift. That would affect me, and I would not be penalized for that. Really quickly before I get into one way that we can protect assets, people always ask about divorce as a way to protect assets, right? So we have clients that come to us, and you know, it's not atypical for, let's just say the wife is like, hey, my husband's going to the nursing home. I don't want, listen, I love him, I care about him, but we've been talking about the idea of divorce literally only really on paper, so divide our assets so that not all of our assets end up going and being spent at the nursing home for his care. We want to make, I want assets for me to live on. Maybe it's a situation where they're young, they're both younger, or maybe the wife or the husband who's not going in the nursing home is younger than the other one. Whatever the situation might be. So we say, listen, you can get divorced, but don't think that you can get divorced and you're going to walk away from the divorce, and the one that's going in the nursing home is going to walk away from the divorce with 10% of the assets, and the spouse that's not going in the nursing home is going to keep 90% of the assets. Medicaid's not going to, the divorce court might allow that. Medicaid will not. Medicaid's going to say, no way are we okay with that. Okay. So, we typically tell clients, it's fine, you can do that, but I probably consider walking away from that divorce pretty evenly split. And you can still have a situation where the nursing home, or where Medicaid, not the nursing home, but where Medicaid, could ask questions, and so we don't love the idea of divorce as a way to protect assets. Let's put it that way. Let's talk about how we protect assets. Okay, for the last 10 minutes here, which is fine. So typically the way that we're going to protect assets, and the way that I'm going to say most elder law attorneys will, at least a lot of our colleagues will, is we will use what we sort of call an asset protection trust. We call it a Medicaid asset protection trust. I mean, that's exactly what we're using it for. I always tell clients, we don't do asset protection for people that are, concerned about somebody suing them, or, we don't set up offshore trusts for people that are, super wealthy. That's not our practice. We help people protect assets that are concerned that if they end up in a nursing home. So we do it in two situations. We do it for folks from a very proactive standpoint, which is ideally more than 5 years prior to ever being in a nursing home. Now, I always listen, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when and if we're ever going to be in a nursing home. So if we're going to do any kind of asset protection, ideally we're doing it when we're younger and healthier. And so there's a trust. We can basically use a trust. Okay, and I won't go into all the details of the trust, but there's a type of trust that we can use where we can put our money in the trust. And after 5 years goes by, if we ever need Medicaid, the assets that we put in that trust, maybe it's just our house. We have some clients, because listen, with this type of trust, the one thing I will say is when we use this type of trust, and we're very upfront with people, obviously, there's clients that I meet with where they want to put this trust together, and I'm not comfortable putting it together for them because of their family situation. And it's because this type of trust, they have to give up control. They have to put somebody else in control of the trust. It'd be too good to be true, right? And I tell people this all the time. It's like, one of those things where it's like the phrase, what is it? You having your cake and eating it too, or whatever it is. I don't know, still need to finish my coffee. So, it would be too good to be true if I could tell Medicaid at some point, oh yeah, those assets are protected. I have control over them. I have full control over them, but they're protected, and you can't. They're not on the table to spend at the nursing home. So if I'm going to put them in this protected trust, I've got to give up control. And so the way that it works with most of our clients is that if they're going to use this asset protection trust, in most cases, they've got an adult child, or maybe in some cases, an adult niece or nephew that they're really close with that they're going to put in charge of this trust. And so when I say that I've got some clients that want to do it, but we're not comfortable with it, it's situations where we've got clients that tell us that they don't have close relationships with their kids, or they don't have kids, and they don't really have any nieces or nephews that they're close with. If they don't have anybody that they're really truly close with that can really step in and manage this trust for them to protect the assets, it doesn't make me feel comfortable, because we're giving a lot of power to this person. And there's a lot more to it, which I won't go into. Obviously I'm happy to discuss it with anybody that ever wants to if anybody wants to come in and schedule a consultation with us, we can go into more detail. But we're giving up a lot of control, and we're giving a lot of power to somebody. And we don't take that lightly. Okay. And certainly not just to get somebody's business. That's not how we operate. So yes, we can set up a trust. We can put assets in it. In a perfect world, we're doing that 5 years before we're applying for Medicaid. And I always tell clients, it's not 5 years before we go into a nursing home necessarily, right? Because if let's just use the example, I've got $1 million. I don't, but let's just say I've got $1 million, and I go into a nursing home and I put this trust together, and I put $400,000 sitting in a checking account, we'll say, and I put it in this trust today. But I go in a nursing home a year from now. Well, that's not 5 years. What about this trust? It's not about going in the nursing home 5 years from the date that I put the assets in the trust. It's about applying for Medicaid 5 years from the date I put the assets in the trust. There's a big difference, because if we have clients that come to us that are very healthy in their 60s and 70s and even early 80s, where they say, Matt, we want to protect our assets, and we put this trust together and we put some assets in it. Great. Hopefully we're good. We've got way more than 5 years on our side, right? Some cases we have clients where we're pretty sure that they might need nursing home care within 5 years. But if we can put some money in the trust and keep enough out that if they do need nursing home care a year from then, they've got enough to pay for the next 3 or 4 years in the nursing home, so that at year 5, from the day that we put money in the trust, now they can apply for Medicaid, we're okay. I hope that makes sense. I hope I explained that right. So again, every situation is different, right? What I also want to say is that it's not, in some situations, people come to us and they have the majority of their assets are in IRAs. Nowadays, a lot less people have pensions and a lot more people have IRAs. It's just how business and work is structured in some industries, right? Obviously, a lot more government jobs and teaching jobs, those are more pension oriented than IRA or 401k oriented. But there are a lot of employees these days where their main assets are their IRAs and 401ks. And so we've got clients that come to us and they might have less than $100,000 in their checking accounts and savings accounts and brokerage accounts, but $1 million in their IRAs and 401ks. We cannot put retirement accounts in a trust. We cannot protect those from a pre-planning standpoint. The only way we could do that is we'd have to cash out the IRA, pay the taxes, and then put the money into the trust. And I would never do that for somebody. I would say you got to go to somebody else. Because from a pre-planning standpoint, I would never want somebody to cash out $300,000 of an IRA, pay $100,000 or more in taxes for the idea that they might need nursing home care at some point, and to protect $200,000. Okay. But what we can do, and I just met with clients recently where this was the case, the majority of their money was in IRAs. So what we did is we said, listen, we talked about all these things that we're talking about today. And I said, listen, now you have a base understanding as to how all this works. What you do know, and what I'm about to say right now, is that if something, God forbid, happens to one of you and you need to go into a nursing home, we can do planning at the last minute. There's planning we can do at the last minute where we can use this asset protection trust that I just talked about, where we can protect assets 5 years in advance, and we can protect assets at the last minute. Now, we might not be able to protect everything, but listen, even when clients come to us 5 years in advance, we're not protecting everything. We're not shoving everything in that trust, because remember what I said, they have to give up control. Clients that come to us, they're not giving up control of all their assets. They might be willing to give up control of some of their stuff, but not everything. And so at the last minute, what we can do is we can protect about half the assets. At the last minute, we can still do planning to protect about 50 to 60% of the assets. I would say 50 just to make it safe. We can use that trust. There's a lot of other moving parts that go into it. The planning's a lot more complicated. But I want people to know that it's not that there's no options at that point. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because we have a lot of clients that come to us and they're concerned that, oh, now my husband's going to the nursing home, or now my wife's going to the nursing home. We didn't do any planning. There's nothing for us now. We're just going to have to spend $100,000 a year. We can still potentially do some planning. Now, what I will say in some of those situations is the type of planning we can do at the last minute might depend on, does the person, and we didn't get into this today, it's not necessarily a part of this conversation, but I do bring it up at times. One thing to consider is, does this person have capacity? Does this person have capacity to sign a trust? Does this person have the ability to sign documents? Because if we're gonna have to do any kind of planning, they need to have the ability to sign those documents. And if they don't have capacity, then we need to make sure that they have powers of attorney in place. Okay, and I normally talk about powers of attorney in all my talks. I'm like a broken record because they are such important documents. So that's something where, for sure, go take a look at a previous talk that I've given, and take a look at the power of attorney section, or shoot me an email and I can send you just my general estate planning talk that I send to prospective clients, where I talk about powers of attorney, but probably not even as much detail as for sure not as much detail as if you find one of the previous talks I've done through the Y. I do a lot more. I go into a lot more detail with the Y talks on powers of attorney, but you got to make sure you got powers of attorney in place, because listen, even though I'm saying we can protect assets at the last minute, if I'm incapacitated, or my wife's incapacitated, we may not be able to do that planning. And in some cases, even if I have a power of attorney for property, which is the financial power of attorney, which allows somebody to create a trust on my behalf or have access to my financials, if that power of attorney doesn't have very specific language, my agent, the person I name, may not be able to do certain planning on my behalf. So I know I'm like over time, so just it's really important to just make sure that you are, getting these power of attorney documents in place, getting the right advice, sitting down with somebody. I don't care if you meet with me, meet with another attorney, another elder law attorney, but do not get documents online. That's the only thing I want to say to people. Do not get documents online. Yeah, so I think that's about it. It's 10:17. I know we went a few minutes late. I'm sorry, Heidi.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Matt, for all that great information. I know that you also have another presentation on October 4th at 9:15 about estate planning 101. So that would be a great follow-up for today.
You got it.
We also have Loneliness in Modern Times coming up on Tuesday, September 19th. So this ends our YES programming for today. Again, I'd like to thank Matt for today's talk about Medicare and Medicaid. That was really great information. Please check out today's talk and then our past talks at our website at www.nsymca.org. The YMCA education series is free and open to the public, but as a nonprofit organization, we are always happy to receive donations from you. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to support adult programming at the North Suburban YMCA, please feel free to make a donation to RY either by going to our website or in person. So that wraps it up today. Thank you again, Matt. Really great information.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.